Hello everyone. As we slowly start to move out of winter here, the weight of all the repots we have been procrastinating gets heavier. So we decided to start early this year. We're also excited to try a new substrate that I'm hopeful will make growing some of the more finicky plants a lot easier. I noticed that we have two of those orchids that require both to be moist or wet at all times, but also, according to people, need to drain well and can't be too soggy. They are this phragmipedium and our miltoniopsis. To my surprise, both of them are doing okay in our care, but I still want to make our lives easier by making the substrate a little more water retentive. I'm going to be using this vermiculite that was kindly sent to us by the company sybotanica, along with other substrates for us to try. We already used their aroid mix in our pothos last year, and I honestly couldn't be happier with how nice the substrate is. So now we're going to try the vermiculite, and we also want to try their succulent mix and their orchid bark in future videos. If you want to check out their store, we have a link in the description, and the store also gave us a 5% discount to offer to our viewers. So if you want to make a purchase, you can use the discount code that's on the screen right now. I'm going to start unpotting this orchid while I explain my reasoning behind the vermiculite, but bear in mind that this is an experiment. We still have to see if the orchids will do better with this new mix or not. So if you're interested in knowing the results, let us know and we'll do an update later. So this is our first phragmipedium, and when we first got it, every guide we looked at said that it needs to be moist, even wet at all times. But then at the same time, it needs to drain very well because it can also be very prone to root rot. Well, I thought this would be easier to get out, but it's not. Because of it needing to drain well, we chose to put it in just this very fine bark and perlite. Well, and a little bit of a bigger granulation of bark. Since then, the plant has been, well, surviving. I wouldn't say it's doing well. And it started doing that thing that paths do, where they put out the new growth way above the rest of the plant. And our experience with paths is that you can just chop off those fans and place them closer to the substrate, and they do well. So we're going to try the same thing with this phragmipedium. That was the main reason we were going to repot this one. But now that I've pulled it out of the pot, I can tell from the smell that it really needed a repot. And that's another thing that I read about frags at the time, was that you have to keep the substrate fresh. It's not as tolerant of an acidified substrate as some other orchids could be. I was expecting a lot more of these roots to be dead, to be honest, but there's new roots growing here. Very few of them even feel mushy. No, these are all firm. Okay, no, this one isn't. But overall, I was expecting to find something much worse inside the pot, especially with the smell that hit me as soon as I pulled it out. I'm also going to try and remove all of these dried up leaves here and try to clean the plant as much as possible before I put it in a new pot. Oh, that almost went very badly. Is there anything growing on this one? These dried up sheets are also prime for pests. Oh, I don't know if you can see there, but there's something growing on this stump here that I thought was completely dead. Something's sprouting there, so we're keeping that one for sure. Because the plan was to cut this one out and place it lower, so maybe I could remove this whole section of the plant. But since it seems to be doing something, I'm probably going to end up keeping it. So since we had to repot either way, I wanted to try something that would keep the mixture moist for longer, but still give it the drainage it supposedly needs. This is because in the summer, I find myself having to water this one in between watering the rest of the collection. And if I could spare myself that trouble, it would be better. And also, I don't think this plant is really thriving, so trying something new is not so much of a risk. And now I have to do that part that I've been dreading, which is to cut these growths off. They have these little remnants of roots here that I don't think are going to do anything, but I'm still going to cut it lower and then see what I do. Oh, there are fresher roots here. Hopefully this will help this rootless plantlet thrive. Now to do the same thing on this side. This seems really extreme, but I've had to do this a couple of times with paths, and like I said, they really took it well. Another little growth. We're really doing this at the exact right time. And this is what's left of the main plant. It feels like I'm leaving all of this for nothing. But if this one's sprouting, maybe the other ones will too. I'll just try and clean these old sheaths out. Trying to get as clean as possible, because last year when we had spider mites, was it last year? The last time we had spider mites, this one was a little bit affected, as you can tell by these leaves here. So last time we repotted it, we used mostly this very fine bark that we have here. If you couldn't tell from when we dumped the contents of the pot, because it was really broken down, probably from being kept wet this whole time. And perlite, which gives a lot of aeration to the medium, and a little bit of this small bark that we have here. That is not from sybotanica, that we're going to be trying probably on a different video. And because of trying to keep it a little bit more moist, this time I thought I would add some of this perlite. Which, by the way, is really pretty. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but it has these sparkly reflections. And we wanted to try this because what we've always heard is that vermiculite is very similar to perlite, but it is a lot more water retentive. So in theory, it should be a good improvement for these particular plants. I'm not exactly sure how much I'm going to add to the mixture, so I put a bit of perlite here too, in case I feel like it needs a little more aeration in the middle. I had to go up a pot size just to make sure I could fit this plant, bury it a bit more, fit all the substrate and the 2 plantlets that we cut. So this mixture I improvised here is 2 parts fine bark, 2 parts vermiculite, 1 part perlite, 1 part small bark. Now I've also decided to add a little bit of perlite because since vermiculite is kind of new to me, I was afraid of overdoing it with the water retention. And I really don't want to kill any of these plants. Now, just to help these new plantlets along in creating roots, I'm going to put a top layer of sphagnum to try and stimulate them into growing roots, or to stop the new rootlets that come out from drying out before they reach the substrate. And there you go. Hopefully the plant will do well now. And now to do the same to the miltoniopsis. We were actually really surprised that this one is not only surviving, but actually doing well. It even flowered last year, if you can believe it. Because miltoniopsis are notoriously finicky. They hate heat, which we have a lot of in the summer. Although we might be moving at some point, and then the heat could be less of a problem. Miltoniopsis also want a lot of moisture, but they rot easily. And they are mostly available from garden centers, where they are not kept in the best conditions, and then they quickly develop that dreadful orange rot as soon as you get them home. This one was a bargain bin experiment. It cost us like €1, I think. And that was the only way I was willing to try miltoniopsis, because of how famously finicky they are. We got this one and the famous Herr Alexander, and unfortunately that's the one that died and this one survived. But you know, if this one keeps doing well, we can always get the other one again. And the reason we're repotting this one is, well, first of all, because it needed a repot. Just like the phragmipedium, they're well known for not tolerating less than fresh substrates, if you will. Removing these old leaves. But also, this is another one that we've had to top up in between waterings every summer. This last summer, every time we didn't, it started having those dreadful accordion leaves. This is another one that I expected the root system to be much worse off. It's actually pretty okay. And of course, reason 1001 why I don't love growing oncidium types. This one is also a climber. So I'm gonna have to keep it tilted in the pot, I think. Which I really don't like. So for this one, we're using pretty much the same mixture. I'm just adding a little bit of sphagnum because it seemed to like the sphagnum the last time I used it. And all I'm going to do is, instead of using just sphagnum, fine bark, and perlite, part of the perlite I'm going to substitute with the vermiculite for added water retention. And I had known for a while that vermiculite was more water retentive, but for some reason it had never occurred to me to use it instead of perlite for these more water-loving plants. So here we are, both plants repotted. Like I said, if you want to see an update on how these plants are doing in a few months, let us know and we'll keep note to do it later. Also, don't forget to check out Sybotanica's website. We have a link in the description of the video. They have a lot of different substrates and other plant care materials, and we can tell they really know their stuff and care about what they do. So we're really looking forward to trying more of the substrates that they sent us. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, leave it a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We have also just reached 1,000 subscribers last month, and we are planning on doing a Q&A video soon. So if you have any questions about orchids, about us personally, leave it in the comments below and we'll answer them in the Q&A video. Other than that, we'll see you again next week. Goodbye.